On the 30th episode of the Vero Beach Social Media Pop-Up Podcast, we have Brian from the Treasure Coast Collective, an Orlando City support group. We discuss Orlando City soccer, marketing, and why it's so important to separate your personal and business lives on social media. Give it a listen. You're going to love it. I guarantee it. Here we go. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Vero Beach Social Media Pop-Up Podcast. I have Brian here from the Ruckus of Orlando City. I don't know how to really describe that, or Treasure Coast Collective of Orlando City, but it's been a while since we've been on the podcast, but we're here at Scott Sporting Goods, chat with Brian. How are you today?
I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here, and thanks so much for having me on, and just ready to jump in, talk soccer. Yeah.
So as you can see, we have a soccer ball here. I am in my the jersey I wear to every game. You're in a jersey that sometimes you wear, sometimes you don't have a jersey
Sometimes
on.
I don't have a shirt on, most of the time, but, start off with the best of intentions, and, it just comes off, things happen.
So to give a little background, Orlando City is a Major League Soccer team in Orlando, obviously, hence the name. And again, Major League Soccer is I describe it to people as like the minor league. So I call it like AA or AAA, whereas the Premier League would be the major leagues. So it doesn't have a huge following like you would think an NFL team or a Major League Baseball team or something like that has, but it does have a huge supporter group, which is absolutely wild. I want to talk to you a little bit. I know you're not the leader, but you are by far the most recognizable person in the stadium at every game, in my opinion. I want to talk a little bit about how you got into soccer at all.
Well, for sure. I think kind of you touched on, American sports now, and, a lot of us maybe grew up on different sports, but the younger generation, I would say, kind of folks that are our age, may have been people that played soccer growing up, or soccer is a big youth sport. Everyone it's a good sport to start your kids in, and a lot of us played soccer, maybe fell out of it, but in the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, have been rediscovering soccer as supporters, as fans. The league is growing, and that's kind of how I got back into it. Orlando City started off in the USL, got an MLS team in 2015, and started, and a lot of people jumped back in. So I have kids that play soccer, but for me, myself, that's kind of how I rediscovered soccer as a supporter, as someone that kind of jumped in for the first time in the Citrus Bowl with the first game in MLS, which was a packed house, 62,000 plus people, and was hooked from the beginning. So I think that's happening around the country. I think soccer is growing. There are other sports that might not be, and the younger generation that played and now is starting to have kids of their own, is kind of jumping back into soccer, and it's by far the most popular game in the world, but it's really cool to see how it's taken off here in America too.
So you touched on something. Orlando City's only been in the MLS for a couple of years. Talk to the listeners about what the USL is, and maybe I'm talking out of class. Maybe we don't know the answer to this, but how did Orlando City even start?
Well, Orlando City started, kind of you touched on it, back in the USL days, 2011, they had a strong kind of local contingent, a strong following, and you see that a lot of times with some of the soccer franchises that are now real hot in MLS. They're not large city markets. It's kind of more of a mid-level town, a Portland, a Kansas City, towns that have history back in some way past history, some like Orlando City more recent, but there are even teams coming out of the lower division leagues right now. Orlando City's got a really important cup final against a team that's in the USL currently, Sacramento, that has a very strong local following too. So kind of that, you see that organic culture start to build versus, a team like Atlanta or Miami that is kind of a pop-up, a lot of money involved, maybe not that authentic culture. And that's why Orlando and some of these other franchises have thrived a little bit more, just running off that culture. Wins, losses, it hasn't been overtly successful, but the culture that the supporters bring is kind of what drives the ship, and that's really what sustains the whole thing, and that's really why I've kind of latched on and been as involved as I am, because to me that's everything, that passion.
So I'll tell my story about how I got into it, and we'll follow into to a segue here. But I have some neighbors. Shout out Alan and his son Zach that are big soccer fans. I'm a big baseball guy, so we were watching the Dodgers in the playoffs, and Zach, who's 21 now, he didn't know anything about baseball, so he comes over. He's watching these playoff games, and he keeps telling me about Orlando City, and I'm like, well, I don't know anything about Orlando City. What's this? So he says, you got to come over and watch a game.
Right.
All right, and they live 5 doors down from me. So I go down, and the very first game I watched was a playoff game 2 years ago where it went to the shootout. Our goalie, Pedro Galisi, gets a red card. They have to bring a defenseman in who's not. And it was wild. I mean, this was like, I cannot believe I'm not into this.
Yeah.
And so the next
watching
year,
it live, I had like 15 heart attacks. But yeah.
so the next year we're like, we got to go to a game.
Yeah.
Okay. So we go, and to back up for a second, while we're watching the other game, they're showing the stands at Exploria Stadium, which, by the way, if you haven't been, I have been to a million sporting events. It's like the coolest place to watch a live sporting event I've probably ever been. But they're showing the crowd, and it's like, okay, yeah, soccer crowd. And then they get to the wall, which is all supporters, and it's going wild. And I see these guys banging these drums, and I'm like, I got to go to a game. I got to go check this out. So we go to a game. And the first game we go to, Orlando City wins on a goal made in stoppage time, right before the final whistle, and we end up getting season tickets. And now, like, we live it. So my experience is I've had 2 incredible games that I went to, or I watched, and then I went to. What is a typical soccer game like for the average fan? I guess. How do they get into Orlando City? And I think you touched on it's probably the culture and the supporter group.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of described, just from a standpoint of, in my experience, it's been just straight up building capacity in a way that you described yourself. It's word of mouth. It's someone bringing someone else. That's how soccer grows, and it's really an old school kind of mentality of you will not have a bad time. If you come and enjoy this, you will not have a bad time. I don't care if you've never seen soccer, don't know anything about it, or you grew up with it and it's your first time, or you're from overseas, or whatever the case is, you will not have a bad time. And that's what I tell everyone, that comes and experiences it for the first time. That's how I experienced it. I got, a ticket. I was in the wall. I watched. It is the supporter section. It's unlike basically any sporting event. And you did kind of described how you have other sports backgrounds too as well. I grew up watching college football, and big sports fan overall. But I mean, to stand up and cheer for a defensive stop on 3rd down and then sit back down again. To describe this to someone, like, we're not watching the game necessarily. I mean, we're not analyzing the play really to an extent. It's all about chance, support, passion, culture. The team goes down a goal, the crowd gets louder. It kicks up that much more. So you don't see that really too much, even in the Premier League or something like that. The wall of safe standing is the first, the supporter section in Orlando City. The way they constructed Exploria Stadium was similar to a lot of the stadiums in the Bundesliga in Germany, where everyone stands. It's first come, first serve.
Oh yeah, there is not a seat there.
No,
It is literally standing room only, general admission. Got to stand. It's wild.
Yeah, so you're standing and jumping.
Just
and
in that one
chanting.
section, folks. There are a bunch of other places you could sit, but we're talking about the wall. And the supporter section.
About 5,000 seats, and that's how it's constructed to be as intimidating as possible. So, the opposing players, when they're warming up, they are right in front of you, and that's constructed purposefully. And it's very interesting because Exploria was built back in 2017. Every stadium, every group, every team that's launched since then has done the same thing. So Orlando really, win, lose, draw has been setting the tone for basically the future of soccer and what it looks like in this country. And it's cool because, if you jump in and are part of it, you're essentially on the cutting edge of what we're doing in this country with this sport.
It's like I said, it's very exciting. I grew up watching other sports. I actually never played soccer as a kid. It was big. It was getting big when I was a kid. I had buddies that played, but Yeah, it's kind of wild. I want to touch a little bit. You talked about college football. You're a graduate of University of Florida, and I'm a Florida State guy, so I didn't realize that, or I wouldn't have invited you.
We got a separation
but,
going on at the table.
Only kidding. But talk about your experience in college and how that's I don't want to say affected, but how it's maybe helped your involvement with Orlando City and the support and the Ruckus and all that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think while I said there's nothing quite like the supporter section or just being involved in soccer right now, probably the closest thing with pageantry, rivalry, that you could compare it to is like the college game in America. Big rivalries that have gone back 100 years plus. Very, very intense, games, 90,000 people in the stadium, whatever the case is, loud crowds, and that kind of that cultural passion where it just divides people up, and it's not, something that's taken too lightly. I think that being part of that and seeing that's something that's probably as similar as you can get to the culture that's being built through soccer just around the world, or what's starting to happen here in this country. So I think it's a good groundwork, good framework. But even if you're a non-sports fan, I know tons of people that do not deal with sports at all. They just don't, but they are huge soccer fans. They're latched into Orlando City, specifically with the supporter groups, and it's just because of kind of what I said before. Someone brought them in to a game. Hey, check it out. You won't have a bad time. Take 2 hours and jump into this, and they're hooked immediately. I just can't. There's so many stories that are similar to yours and mine, where you come once and these people are like going all in, season tickets. They're going to away games. They're all in, and it's just because the atmosphere that's created. It's contagious. You want to be part of it. And again, it's not something that you see too often, kind of in this day and age with sports.
What is the Florida Georgia equivalent for Orlando City?
Oh man, that's a great question. From what I've seen, it's Atlanta. If you were around, when Atlanta first got, and you got you have the like I described before, just the complete opposite of culture. You have Orlando City that came up from the ground, people that have been there, when they were forming supporter groups in rooms with 5-10 people, and now are still there, watching 60,000 plus in the Citrus Bowl, watching the new stadium go up, watching just 2 days ago Orlando City go now to a U.S. Open Cup final versus a pop-up stadium overnight.
Well, don't they play in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium?
They play in Mercedes. They don't have a stadium. It was just big money overnight. A lot of really talented players, and is basically the hot thing to do in town until Georgia football starts.
Right.
So you've got the plastic fans versus the people that are really about it, win, lose, or draw. And I think that's where you have that when Atlanta first came into the league. A lot of us went to Bobby Dodd Stadium when it was still up before they moved, and that away trip was something. We'll just say that. We won't get into that on the podcast.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about this U.S. Open Cup. Orlando City's in the final against Sacramento, and lay the groundwork. Explain to people the difference between the U.S. Open Cup and the MLS Cup.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so U.S. Open Cup is basically it's been around way longer,
since the 1800s.
Yeah, so
right?
a real long time, over 100 years, and it's essentially a tournament that starts at the bottom. It starts with kind of semi-pro teams, amateur teams. They start playing each other early, and it's knockout. So basically, these teams, everyone has a shot. It's a tournament and this is kind of unique to soccer. It happens in Europe and other countries too. There's multiple things going on at once. There's a season happening, but there's other tournaments.
My wife could not
as
figure
well.
this out. I'm like, the U.S. Open Cup final, September 7th, and we're going to go. And she's like, wait a minute, I thought you had games after that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, it's definitely it takes some time to wrap your head around if you're not used to that, and us as American sports fans, we're not. So essentially, while the season has been going on, the MLS season has been going on, this tournament's been going on too. So that presents, from a coaching standpoint or anything else, you have to be really strategic about what you're doing. So you'll see, teams start out, maybe they're playing, some secondary players in this tournament because the season's more important, or people think so. But Orlando's made a run. They've taken out some rival teams. They've taken out Tampa Bay Rowdies. They've taken out Miami. And
Inter Broward.
Yes, yeah, they've taken out Broward. And they've made it all the way. 2 nights ago, they had a home game against the New York Red Bull, and won 5-1. And now are in the final, hosting a U.S. Open Cup final. You win that, you're in CONCACAF Champions League, and that is a tournament that you're going to start playing the hottest teams in Central America, Mexico, et cetera. So, you could possibly see Orlando really get some serious play, not only in this country, but with some other major teams too.
But now getting on the world map, which
Absolutely.
is really exciting.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, the Premier League, which again I call the Major League Baseball of soccer, had 2 teams come to Florida, Chelsea
Yes.
and Arsenal. Chelsea played Miami and Arsenal played Orlando City. Chelsea beat Miami at like 9-0.
Yeah.
So the day or 2 days before Orlando City played Arsenal. So we go to the game and we're expecting to get absolutely stomped. And they go into halftime, and Orlando City and Arsenal, which is like my kid's Little League team playing the New York Yankees,
Right,
is tied
exactly.
1-1
Exactly.
at halftime. And it was just wild. Orlando City did lose 3-1, but it was really cool seeing how they can compete on a real scale. I mean, this is a fun team to watch.
Yeah, it was a good time, and I think people. There was a game. A couple days later, Arsenal and Chelsea are still on a tour in America.
Yep.
They're warming up for the Premier League season to start, which is on an alternate schedule than the MLS. And Arsenal played Chelsea in a friendly simultaneously to Orlando playing a game too. Right down the street. 5 blocks.
Literally
away, or whatever the
walking
case is.
distance. I mean,
And there was a lot of back and forth. Oh, are you going to go to the Orlando game? Are you a real supporter? Or are you going to go see Arsenal and Chelsea? The way I look at it, overall, 80,000 people were watching soccer in Orlando.
within a half mile
Correct.
of each other.
So if we're talking about the growth of the sport, I went up there. I saw people from that lived down where I live that were up at the game. Parents from my kids' soccer team. Obviously, a ton of my friends that were going into the Orlando game. So it's. At the bottom line, there's a lot of well, do you support the local team, or are you going to support the
Right.
go see your Premier League team? Irregardless of whatever, you have 80,000 people watching soccer on a Saturday night in Orlando. So
Right.
to me, that's a win.
Yeah, we actually did not go to either game. We watched both games at my house because it was just
Also,
so
a win.
cool.
That's sometimes the house move is the best move.
Well, again, we're in Vero, so we're an hour and a half away. You're in Hope Sound, so
Yes.
you're 2 hours away.
Yeah, 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So man. So I want to kind of shift gears a little bit because
Sure.
this is a marketing company and a marketing podcast and all that. I want to talk about how you get, whether it's the Ruckus, Orlando City, Treasure Coast Collective, which we haven't even touched on yet, how you get that in front of just general soccer fans, or maybe even Orlando City fans that don't know you exist. Is there a marketing tactic that you guys take?
Sure. Yeah. It's essentially what happened was in early 2015, before the team kind of got into the season, all I did was kind of make an inquiry about if there's anything local. Orlando is a big area. I live nowhere near Orlando. Any local folks that want to get together and watch soccer around where I live, which is in Martin County, like I said, 2 hours plus south. There's no team in Broward at this point. This is the soccer team. And didn't get a lot of, response, but after a little while, people started to link up a little bit. Like our first time watching, we were, and Buffalo Wild Wings with like 5 people.
Right.
Like we had like 2 other people that were in purple shirts that were unrelated to anything we were doing. We were like, yo, come get in the
You
picture.
gotta come
so we
sit
could,
with us.
yeah,
So it looks like we have a half a dozen.
We have people, right? So, but a buddy of mine, kind of he messaged and is like, hey, I just like moved to the area. Like I'm a huge soccer guy. Like I live in Jupiter. So he was the first one, then someone else. Second one, just starting to look at like Facebook, Twitter, and just continuing to kind of put ourselves out there. Suddenly you got like, 3 games in the season, you have a group of 5 people that are going to carpool together. We'll meet at this person's house. We'll go to the game. Then it's about like branding, right? So now we have 10 people, 15 people. We have a name. What are we? What are we doing? So what are we? What's something that's quick, catchy, and that people will remember? Treasure Coast Collective. We're from the Treasure Coast, right? We're a group of friends that's going to go up and watch soccer, and then first person's like, hey, we should bring a pirate flag. Okay, so like 5-6 games after that, like, oh well, pirate flags are $5 on Amazon. Let's get 20 of them. Now you're in the wall, with thousands of people, and people are starting to ask questions.
What's this pirate thing?
What's going on with this? Oh well, we're TCC. We're a group of friends that got together, and we come up from down south every game, and then suddenly it starts expanding. Like, buddy comes up to me, hey, who are you guys? Like, you guys, I love your energy. But I live in Orlando. Okay, so wait, now TCC is not a location; it's a state of mind.
Right.
So now we start expanding more. Like, so then it comes to the next year, we have 100 people, in the tailgate, having a good time, drinking, talking soccer. The next year, hey, let's bring all these people to Atlanta to an away day. So now it becomes a thing, and it's really started. It's nothing rocket science-y. It's essentially word of mouth. You bringing your friend that's going to come to the game, and everyone brings someone else. It's building capacity. That's what it is, the old school way.
So when I signed up for the Ruckus, again, it was me and it was my neighbors, and we had a handful of people, and I must have done it through email or something, because your wife got the inquiry.
Right.
And for those of you that don't know, there's a big parking lot that everybody goes to before the game and hangs out. Again, people are drinking, having a good time, waving their flags. And I show up because I want to get a shirt for my son.
Right.
And so I show up again, like my first game that we've gone to, and I'm like, hey, is there a merch tent or a table somewhere? And they're like, oh, go find Aaron. Okay. We bop around, we find Aaron, and she's like, this merch is really for Ruckus members. I'm a member. And she's
Right.
like, really? What's your name? I said, Curtis Carpenter. She's like, from Vero Beach. And I was like, what? And she said, oh, we're from down in Hope Sound. And she started telling me about TCC, and then you started talking to me about TCC, and it's like, okay, this is a real thing. There's a real group of people down here that follow Orlando City. This is amazing.
Yeah,
So-
yeah, that's how it goes. And again, there in Orlando City, and the supporters, there's 2 large contingent of supporter groups, the Ruckus and the Iron Line Firm. TCC has had a home kind of within the larger context of these supporter groups of the Ruckus. We've always really pushed our edge, though, being unique, standing out, supporting in a diehard kind of capacity, that we're going to be friendly, be inclusive, welcome people in, and every single person that's been involved in the group, they either have someone that's welcomed them in or have a similar story to what you just shared here. I have a similar story myself. I will always be that to someone else because someone was like that to me. Someone brought me in and said, hey, grab a beer.
Yeah.
For me, it was the president of the Ruckus back when I joined, and his name was Jerry. Like, I showed up to the tailgate with Aaron and knew absolutely nobody. And this is, again, with 65,000 people that are about to go into the game, and this dude's like, hey, yo, what's your name, blah blah blah. So now I feel connected, and it's cool to have, you have your niche, you have your people that you roll with, and it's the funnest thing ever to have that. And then also, like, I've been to Portland with these people. We just went to Austin, Texas to go to a game. We had 5 days and just have a good time, and now it's turning into something that's even much larger than just the soccer team and on the field.
One thing I wanted to touch on, and you just did, is inclusivity.
Sure.
My goodness, the diverse demographic that you guys have out there is like nothing I've ever seen. I mean, old, young, black, white, fat, skinny, it didn't matter, man. Tatted up, clean, whatever. I mean, it's like every single type of person that you can imagine, a cross section of America is this group that you guys have, and it's really cool because, like you said, you feel like you can be included. You're not going to be shoved out. You're not going to be pushed out for whatever your thoughts or whatever your beliefs or whatever your looks or whatever your anything is like.
Right.
You're welcome,
Right.
and it's like this is a cool spot.
Yeah, and it's necessary now. I mean, in this day and age, in the context of this country, and everything that's gone on in the last, 5-10 years, this is like a kind of a safe space for a lot of people too, as well, because it's somewhere that you can go. Whatever went on in your Monday through Friday, your 9 to 5, or whatever the case is, once you kind of are in in the terraces and in the stadium, you kind of let that go, and there is nothing more authentic than what this is. And like you said, everyone kind of comes up with the same thing. Well, how did we do that? It's just about using soccer, which is a sport that connects people across the world. So that as the framework, and then just being all in, passion-wise, culture-wise, support-wise, going in and like losing your mind for 90 minutes. It's not like, Erin used to, my wife, she would, when we were starting the Citrus Bowl, there'd be people like just kind of standing there. We're doing the chants, and if you don't know, the chants go on in the wall. The
Chants
entire
are
game,
wild.
The entire game. They don't stop. So before the game even starts, the chants start, the drums start, and it goes the entire time. So the chants are led by capos that kind of lead the thousands of supporters in the chants. And it's your first game. That can be a little intimidating. You don't know these chants. Everyone's yelling. My wife printed up 200 chant cards and just takes them in her bag, passes them out. Hey, here you go. And marketing standpoint, we slap the TCC logo on there and pass them out to everyone. Now you got 200 people that now feel included immediately, right? Feel like they're connected. Now they're not standing there kind of uncomfortable while people are screaming, yelling, throwing water, chanting, etc. And now they're in too. So that's a quick and easy way to be inclusive, to get people feel like they're involved that may not have been, and then also kind of let people know, hey, who you are, and hey, if you're interested in this, roll with us next time too.
Right.
And it's not like a rocket science type of thing. It's not something that takes a lot of time. It's just kind of making that quick connection and keeping it.
And if you go to the game and you read the chants, or if you chant the chants, there's a little Spanish lesson in there too.
Correct. Yeah.
Half of it's Spanish.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that plays off on the culture of the team too. You have a large contingent of players that are from Brazil, a large contingent of the players that are from South America, and a support but the support, we have folks from all over the world that come in and just have a good time with it. So as far as the inclusivity, it's a completely different level than you'll see on any other like sport wise.
One of the coolest things I've seen is at the end of the game, win, lose, draw, whatever, the team comes and they actually like bow to the wall and like they thank them and they're waving. And I've seen your kids down there high-fiving like some of these players.
Yeah, my kid is he's the one that gives all whenever there's a goal, somehow whoever scored is wearing my kid's sunglasses.
Yes.
That's happened like 3 times.
It's hilarious. But
yeah.
Anyway, the way that the team embraces
Sure.
the supporter group is amazing. So the Los Angeles Dodgers have a group called Pantone 294, mildly similar to what you guys are doing. But there's no major fan involvement. After the game,
Right.
Mookie Betts isn't going out and waving to Pantone 294, but you'll see Facundo Torres come out and wave and bow and shake hands and high five.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is really cool.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to kind of the originality of Orlando City when it first started as being so grassroots. You don't have that maybe necessarily everywhere, but I think the grassroots piece of how this started, it's not lost on the players. You have players that are from other countries. You also have players that are from Orlando, that are homegrown players like a Benji Michel who scored in that game 2 nights ago. When he's walking around and pointing at the Orlando City crest, like that means something to him. This is his town, and you're celebrating now a huge win in front of your family, but also these supporters that will go all in for you. And it's really not like, to me, it's not. I can't really describe it as like a hobby or something like that, because once you're bought in, this is a lot of what you do. It takes a lot of time, and a lot of people drop a lot into it, but like the end product is always, something that is really special.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch gears again. I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned this paragraphs ago, minutes ago, about no matter what your 9 to 5 is, Monday through Friday, you have this to kind of rely on. And
Sure.
I want to switch back into the social media side of things. You make it a point, which I think is incredibly important, and I think that it's a great teaching moment for anybody that's listening or watching this. You 100% hard and fast, you separate your personal life on social media
Right.
with your Orlando City support
Sure.
on social media.
Sure.
I think it's brilliant. Talk to me about how you came up with that idea, how you do it, the struggles with it, so on and so forth.
Well, I think you gotta be mindful that while people, what you do in your, and I think the what people do on in this regard, in the supporter culture, et cetera. Everyone has lives and jobs too as well. I'm in education.
And we on purpose have not mentioned your last name.
And people know my last name,
Yeah.
so
I know, but
it's
yeah.
all good. But I'm in education. I have been for quite some time, and I love that. The two are really kind of separate, but whatever your job is, whatever you're doing, I think it's real important to be mindful of how you're portraying yourself on social media, how you're portraying yourself just in general too. You have to be really mindful of all of that. But I think it's a good lesson to have and think about, and things connect. I've had tons of friends that work in education too that come to the games as well. But you also you got to just look at that, I think, a little strategically, no matter what you're doing or how you're interacting. We have a few different like handles or tags on social media, and use it to push the edge, but also build support, and I think that's always been helpful for us. We like to push a little bit of an edge, and be a little I don't want to say aggressive, but definitely draw attention to what we want to have happen as far as the culture and what soccer should look like, and if you're not sure how to jump in and get there. So people could say what they want about it, but the end of the day, I know what we're doing is working because people are involved. And
Right.
overall, that does play into anything in your job. The inclusivity factor, that's huge for me no matter what. So for me, that's the crossover. You never want to have anyone feeling like they can't be a part of something. And that's in anything in your work life or your outside of work life too.
Well, I think it's, like I picture you, with your shirt off, and maybe you got a beer in your hand, and somebody gets a picture, and then they tag you, and you don't have the separation. And
Right.
now, you're in education, so one of these kids' parents sees it, and it's like, oh, well, this guy, he teaches my kids, or he's at my kid's school, he needs to be fired. And we see that all the time. We're seeing that in local politics. I don't know about Martin County, but in Indian River County, we're seeing stuff like that happen now.
Yeah.
And it's like, what you want to do on your personal time and
Sure.
in your own life should not affect your profession if you're doing your profession correctly.
Right. Yeah.
And this is an easy way to just get away from that.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
separate them.
And I think people
things.
need that. I think to a certain extent, everyone needs to have. We talk about self-care and whatever that is, whatever your job is. The last 2+ years have not been easy for a lot of people. Let me tell you what. When I remember the first game of the 2020 season, we got one game in, and I remember the tailgate lot being packed with people, and everyone was like, "Did you hear about like that COVID thing?
Right,
That's I didn't hear about it. Okay, well, what?" And then 1 week later, everything shut down immediately. And this is what people rely on. A lot of people, use their weekends to whatever your passion is. That stopped. In that playoff game that you referenced, it was we had to be 6 feet apart from each other. It's the biggest win in our club's history. We were
you can't high-five each other.
Yeah, with masks on, and and it's fine. It was we had to do it for safety, but it's just so crazy to think about the trajectory that's come from too. So people need. My thing is like people need something, right? People need something to be passionate and involved in, and not necessarily just their work. Mm-hmm. It's got to be something that you you kind of separate that too, and you get out from what you're doing every single day. And to me, that's been a big thing for me. And I'm sure people will say similar things. We have all types of people that are involved in our group. We have, people with creative jobs, people that are, in marketing, people that are in education, people that are in healthcare. A lot of people that are in healthcare that are involved in our group too as well. And their day-to-day has been extremely difficult over the past few years. But, they come to the games too as well. And this is their way to kind of let off some steam and have fun. And I think it's always a good thing to have that in your life.
Yeah, yeah. I wrote notes before we came here, and I left them at the office.
That's cool.
And mentally, all those notes have been checked off.
We're checking them. Let's go.
So all my mental notes are checked off. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to talk about or you want to discuss.
Yeah, I mean, I think also one thing too when you're talking about, because I think the growth of the sport in general, when we're talking about like where I live, where we're talking about supporting your local team, that goes hand in hand with like even at the ground roots neighborhood level. And we've got a big kind of an issue in this country just with the growth of soccer, because the soccer can be expensive, for kids to get into. Once you start getting,
this better than anybody. You got kids that are playing.
And once you start getting involved, you have American football where the strongest players are sometimes in areas where coaches are going in that are taking kids out of really tough environments, and they're hungry. They play with that edge. In America, unfortunately, over the last few years, it's kind of been opposite. If you want to get involved in soccer, you have to, and really be good, you have to come from some money a little bit, or have the financial capabilities to do that. So I think I just want to give a quick shout out to Hope Sound Soccer Club, because my kids are fortunate to play in a club that's right down my street, 2 minutes away from my house. And it's really cool to see the local growth of a small town in Hope Sound. My kids started playing, my oldest when he was 7, did a tryout. No one really came out. It's like a Disney movie, right? Like some kids showed up in like baseball cleats and so, so like they were just like, and myself and a couple other parents kind of pushed like a competitive, let's really get a team going at a competitive level. And the first season they got squashed, bro. They got spanked every single game. We were getting smoked. Like we got like Mercy like 18-0 in the first game of the season. And let me tell you what, the last game they won like 4-3, and the other parents thought we were insane people because we celebrated like we won the World Cup.
Right.
4 years later, that same team has stayed together. Now they're in middle school. They're all best friends. The club is starting to expand, and they're doing it in a way that is affordable. They're going in and getting kids out of spots that may have been overlooked, and we're playing teams that have a pool of 100 kids to pick from.
Right.
When they're starting out there, my kid's jersey, is 2 sizes too small. We're playing teams. They got 4 different types of kids, and we're beating them, So, like, even that edge, like, I've seen it that we try to bring, in the stadium in Orlando. I've seen it just in local soccer, but I think it's because you have to really think strategically. When we talk about marketing, there's some issues with pay for play. It's in baseball too.
My kids play baseball. I see it,
and I think that's affecting American soccer on a grand stage. The U.S. men's national team. I mean, we're in the World Cup now. Didn't qualify in 2018. We have a huge pool of talent, but sometimes it's being missed. So if you got kids in local leagues, or you're thinking about getting them started, look strategically about what you're doing and what you're supporting, because sometimes the flashy club with all these different things, that's not going to be the best for your kid. My kid's coached by a former Olympic gold medal winner, and she's amazing, and she coaches my kids' team got picked up by Hope Sound Soccer Club, and let me tell you, what a good feeling to go to these these different clubs with all these resources, et cetera, and to beat them. It's awesome. So now we have even like a little supporter group of parents. Like no one wants to mess with the Hope Sound parents.
A little mini Treasure Coast collective with the Hope Sound Soccer
games.
Club.
And the people that are listening know, because a lot of my friends that go to Orlando games, they'll pull up to in Hope Sound and just pull up to my kids' games, and my kids scoring goals and like signaling them and stuff. It's pretty
They're
cool.
waving flags, and purple smoke everywhere.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a good time. But I think the overall message is just to parents who might be thinking about getting their kid involved in soccer. Just think strategically about what you're doing, and sometimes going flashy or paying the big bucks, that's not going to necessarily make your kid happy. What will is thinking about something that where the club kind of takes this perspective, thinking strategically, marketing themselves strategically, and making things affordable too as well in the best way possible. And always open to discuss that too, because it's something I'm really passionate about, especially when we're talking about the growth of the sport from the ground level, because this is setting the tone for the next 15, 20 years in this country for the continuation of a sport that's really quickly becoming extremely popular.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I want to thank Scott Sporting Goods for having us here. Bob and Scott have been great. And that was a great segue into local.
For sure.
Local. I mean, it's a local shop that's been here for a million years. Scott Sporting Goods is where I bought all my stuff when I played Little League as a kid. And, the
awesome.
Amazons and the drop shipping of the world can take places like this out of business. So, again, if you're local and you need a baseball bat or a soccer ball or something like that, come down to Scott's and grab it. And I think we have something for you. I don't know where it is. Over there. Brian, we went to just a nice little gift here.
Yeah, swagged out
I
here.
see you're always wearing hats. And, got you a T-shirt. I hope it fits. And
thank you, man.
Yeti. So
that's
yeah,
awesome.
man. No, I want to thank you very much for coming all the way up here and interviewing with us and coming on the podcast. And like I said, Orlando City has become a big part of my life now. And like I said, you're one of the reasons why you're the greatest ambassador for the team that I've ever met, more so than the folks in the front office at the team. So again, I just want to thank you for coming out and appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thanks so much for having me. It was fun. I love talking soccer. And I love them. I love y'all set up here. I love that you guys do something. It's a really good time. So thank you.
All right. Dale, mi amor.